I am tired. I am spent. I am drained. I am emotional. But you know what? Most importantly, I am ready to talk about it all. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today I'm coming to you all with something I'm sure is quite surprising to you all. That is none other than my thoughts on the finale of Interview with the Vampire, Season 2, Episode 8, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else. This episode was directed by Levin Akin and written by Roland Jones. So yes, I say that this is very much a surprise because I didn't get a chance to recap this particular season. I've been watching it, I've been enjoying it, but as far as content and giving recaps, I've gotten caught up with the film festival circuit, which has been enjoyable, but I've been leaning more into the movie side of things. I recently, of course, gave my thoughts on Bridgerton, and that's been an experience. So as far as television in general, I haven't been able to give as much time and energy to that. But I have definitely been watching. And this season of Interview with the Vampire, like, when I tell you tens across the board, that is not an understatement. Okay, no, like 20s across the board. How about that? Like, no notes. I mean, maybe a couple of things, but I mean, come on. Like, I am so shocked, but also impressed. And if I'm going to use, since I just mentioned it, Bridgerton as an example, this is how you utilize a 2-year wait between seasons and come back even stronger, even harder than before. Because Bridgerton, Interview with the Vampire, oh my gosh. Like, knocked it not even out of the park at the stratosphere. So good. Just beyond, right? I already had gotten on board with the first season when a lot of people weren't really checking for it, didn't really know about it because it was on AMC Plus. I'm hearing now, of course, it's going to be on Netflix, which is definitely going to expand its visibility, which I'm very excited about. But that first season, it's just like, not that many people were talking about it, not that many people knew about it, but I enjoyed it immensely. And when I did my ranking of my favorite television series of 2022, Interview with the Vampire was very much up there. Now, I'm not going to spoil where I ranked it because you can just go and check that out for yourself. But yes, it was definitely on my radar and it was such a great experience. So I figured since I made it to the end, I would kind of switch it up a little bit, not necessarily do a recap, but kind of do a semi-recap, but also ranking my favorite moments from this finale because there were plenty. Okay, so many things to discuss. So to kick things off, I'm going to begin with an honorable mention, and that goes to none other than Nicolas de l'Enfant. Now we know that Nicolas has a very interesting relationship with Lestat, and we see that in the episode No Pain when Armand is recounting his story. However, we also know that Armand's perception of the truth is complicated, to say the least. So considering where we leave off with Nicolas in that episode, I thought it was really interesting how us seeing his grave in this episode amongst the many graves in the Théâtre des Vampires, I was very excited because I know that the Vampire Lestat is coming up next for season 3 and I am hyped. And it was just another reminder that we are going to see the remainder of Nicolas's story play out considering what we saw earlier in the episode No Pain. And we're going to see how he gets from that point to, I guess, wherever he ends up as far as his grave. I know aspects of that because I know the story, but this showrunner and these writers are remixing things. So it definitely, I don't think it's going to be what I thought it was. You never know. So even though I think I know, I don't really. So overall, having Nicholas's name displayed as another reminder of what's coming, yes, I was absolutely excited about that. Now, jumping over to my number 10 moment, That goes to the moment early on in the episode where Louis is discussing his thoughts about what coulda, shoulda, woulda happened had things played out differently with Lestat. We all have that question. It's kind of an existential question. Like, would this choice have changed anything? Would it have altered everything? Would it have made the difference in what my life is now? Or was my life inevitable? Was it meant to play out this way? And no matter what I did, would we have gotten to this point? So the fact that he has that thought and then kind of comes to a realization about it, it was significant. And then of course, when you see everyone, his family, his life before becoming a vampire, the people he saw after becoming a vampire, like his, all these people that played a significant part in his life, like it hit. It was definitely a moment. Probably not as significant as the rest, but it was one that definitely stood out to me. At number 9, we have a moment that was very subtle, and it's not really something that might jump out at you immediately, but it's something that I found to be very poignant. And that is the scene at the very, very end when we see Louis sitting in what appears to be a gallery, or what might also be a meditation room. We see a painting of his brother Paul on one wall. And then when he sits down on the rock, we see Claudia's dress hanging on the wall behind him. And I was just like, ah. Just having those mementos of two of the most important people in his life, I just was like, man, and of course we know the tragic circumstances when it comes to both of them. So I thought it was beautiful and kind of sad, but kind of poetic that while he's there in this moment of really acknowledging his strength, those two people who played such a significant part in his journey and in his life are right there on the opposite sides of him. I was like, yes. Woo! Yes, that did it for me. Okay, now at number 8, we have what I call the end of Lestat. And that is the moment where Louis confronts Lestat and he is ready to kill him. And we're thinking like, uh-oh, like, how is this about to go? But then what ends up being, at least from Louis' standpoint, Lestat's death is basically Louis going off with Armand and choosing to live a full life with him. And to an extent, like you can see Lestat's stomach kind of turning a little bit. But then what makes this scene so significant, and the reason why I mentioned it here, is because what Louis believes he's doing by going off with Armand and punishing Lestat is actually the opposite. Because he's not aware of what has really happened in this situation and how his entire life is about to be shaped by this decision. And oh man, this scene hits one way the first time you see it, and it hits totally, completely different the next time you see it. So I had to go ahead and put this one out there because the double meaning and the added significance to this scene from the first viewing to the second and, multiple viewings, whoa. Like, it's crazy. At number 7, I should have seen this one coming. I don't know why I didn't. I guess it's because Daniel is obviously older in this version that they've done, and he's not the boy, as he's called in the original novel or story. So I was kind of thinking like, okay, maybe they're not going to incorporate this the same way. And so first we have the scene where Daniel is having that interview with the reporter. It wasn't really an interview. It was more like a roast session. Daniel was going off. And it's so funny to see how I've come full circle with Daniel because Daniel worked my nerves the first season. And in a good way. But it's just kind of like, he was just kind of like this old, grumpy curmudgeon who had all these snappy retorts. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, Daniel, cut it out. Like, gone somewhere. So he got on my nerves, even though I kind of had this love-hate, or maybe like love-annoyance, love-irritation situation with the character. But man, just really seeing the growth and really seeing like the ultimate significance of Daniel was really something. But him going in during that interview was already a moment. And I probably would have had that here. But oh my gosh, and it didn't occur to me because I looked at his nails during that interview and I was like, man, that looks a lot like, the vampire nails. And I genuinely thought, I'm serious. I genuinely thought that Daniel might be trolling Louis by being like, oh, let me put on, let me emulate the vampire manicure, the vampire nails. And then, of course, we get the reveal when he takes the sunglasses off and then his eyes change. I said, no. Ah. Wow. That was smooth. That quick little, the way that they, that reveal, wow. That was great. That was great. Like I said, I should have seen it coming, but I kind of got caught off guard with everything else that was going on. But yes, Daniel finally becoming what he's meant to become in the original story. But like I said, I was like, Daniel's old. Maybe it ain't going to happen. Well, I was wrong. So definitely a moment I had to include here. At number 6, we have the end of Armand. This is basically when Daniel pulls a reverse Uno card on Armand. It's just like, so yeah, let's let's bring out some truth today, all right? And he basically reveals the reality of what Armand actually did by directing the play and by causing everything, being the mastermind, being the puppeteer behind everything that has actually happened. And it's one of those things that we knew, but it's one thing for us to know and for Louis to see that, and to realize that. And it's like, you spent the last 77 years of your life with someone who did this and was willing to watch you and Claudia both die. And it was just like, I mean, it's an obvious parallel, but in the same way that some of us can be in very toxic relationships, or we can kind of trick ourselves into believing we're satisfied, or we can be manipulated, which is more accurate, or more, that's a better comparison. But people who can be manipulated in relationships believing that like this is ideal and this is the relationship for me and it means so much, and in the end and in the end you are actually living a lie, and the person that you are in partnership with is actually pulling strings and orchestrating this relationship, and you're just oblivious to it all. So I love the fact that we finally saw the reveal, and understanding that the banishment that was supposedly orchestrated by our mom was actually Lestat. I was like, man. Oh, again, just the subverting of expectations and the things I thought I knew and could expect knowing the original story. And I got my mind blown once again. So that was really something. I would say, if anything, I think that moment with Louis confronting Armand after the fact, it could have gone a little bit further. It would have been interesting to see. Maybe it's just because I was just like, go all the way there. But it would have really have been something for Louis to kind of emulate that moment he had with Lestat, where it's like, hey, I'm going to pick you up, take you on a trip on the Skyline Express, and then just drop you. I would have been fine with that. I understand that for Louis, it was just like, okay, sometimes it doesn't require all that, and he had gotten all his rage out a long time ago, but I would have been fine with just a little more, like, because he deserved it. 100%. At number 5, we have the destruction of the Théâtre des Vampires. Listen, this is a moment that, whether it's the book, whether it's the film from 1994, or even this version, it's always satisfying. Louis, going haywire and saying, you know what? It's time for all y'all to die. Like, it's just satisfying, like the fire and all of that. But I think what also made it special in this particular episode, in this adaptation, is seeing at the end of the episode insider, they actually had to put cement board in the area so that they could contain the fire and not actually, cause something widespread. But yeah, it's so satisfying. And then of course, seeing the fire rise above the sign and Louis walking off, it was so great. I mean, it's always been great, and it was just as great here, if not better, as far as that moment. At number 4, we have the hunting down and killing of Celeste, Estelle, and especially Santiago. Now, I have to say that as far as the 1994 film, that was a moment that was always kind of to me. It just felt like a lot of buildup for something that was fairly simplistic. However, I do think that the way that was done here was... it definitely took it to another level. There's still a sense of simplicity to it, but the build-up goes much harder this time around, especially with all the things that Louis is saying. And even before that, the way Louis rigs the motorcycles and we get the explosion, but also how Louis uses, you know, that telepathy and that communication between the minds to humiliate and insult Francis / Santiago and really put his business on Front Street. I was like, dang, Louis is going in and Santiago could not take it. Could not take it. And when he popped up and got the it hit a lot different this time. So I was just like, Santiago, you had it coming. Honestly, it could have been worse, low key, but it was just like, you know what? It's time to get you out of here. So I was fine with it. But I think what was best, I think what was most effective about that moment was just Louis giving it to him, like reading him down. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Like giving Santiago the business verbally. Honestly, that was the real death, even before he actually died. At number 3, we have Louis and Lestat's conversation, which turns into reconciliation. Again, this is a moment I was familiar with from the book, but all of this, definitely new. I was familiar with, as soon as Louis saw the guy, or the fledgling, so to speak, I was like, oh, I guess this is how we're going to lead into that moment, because that is how it happens. But the conversations they have and, gosh, the performances, which have already been good, it's just like, every time I think we've gotten the peak as far as the performances, we go even deeper. And what Lestat says about what it was like when he looked into Claudia's eyes, what Louis acknowledges about what he did when he, you know, brought Claudia to him, and all of it. And it's just something significant about what their relationship has been and what it means for each of them to see each other and acknowledge each other and the things that they have done and the mistakes that they have made, and to really give voice to that. So, and then of course, while this storm is raging, which they don't have to worry about because they can't die. But still, I thought that was funny. But I was like, oh Lord, not y'all trying to get me to cry again. Come on now. Yes. But of course, such a moment. And just another example of why we need some nominations around here for these performances. At number 2. I could have left this at one name. But I'll at least give Magnus his moment because he is mentioned as well. Oh my gosh. When Lestat said,
I have the blood of Akasha in me.
Oh! Oh my God. Oh. The queen is coming. The queen is coming. I was like, you said her name. It's just, I kid you not. When he said Akasha's name, it's like a shiver went through my body. And I got an adrenaline rush. I was like, oh. Look, I'll just leave it at that. The queen is coming, and I am ready. And at number 1, my number 1, numero uno moment of this finale. When Louis Dupont du Lac, the Louis Dupont du Lac, when that man / vampire, when that man sat down and put everybody on notice and said, here's my address, the door is open, you've been running your mouth, you want to do something about it, here I am. I own the night. So in other words, what Louis was basically saying was, Yeah, we ducking and bucking and ready to fight. I bet you
I'ma throw them things so haters better than worse.
I was too through. What a way to end the episode. It was perfect. It was perfect. And I think what I also love is that in comparison to the book's portrayal of Louis and also absolutely Brad Pitt's portrayal of Louis in 1994, Louis is kind of a sad sack. You understand why, but it's just kind of like, wah, 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 wah. This Louis ain't that. And that last scene absolutely made that clear. And something I was reminded of is that Louis has the blood of Armand, of Lestat. So I'm just kind of like, y'all can show up if you want to, but I don't think this is going to go the way you guys think it will. I still want to see it though. So yes, that officially closes out my thoughts on the season finale of Interview with the Vampire Part 2. I've already said it, but the vampire Lestat can't come soon enough. And also considering that this is the Immortal universe, I remember being excited when I saw, I believe it was the very first episode, they said, they had that part that said Immortal Universe. I'm like, are they going to do it? And I saw the Witches of Mayfair, or I saw Mayfair Witches, but I was like, but are they going to really go there? And they are. They are. And I'm so happy about it. We also are getting a series centered around the Telemasca, who of course factored into this series, but also are featured in Mayfair Witches. I haven't had the chance to check that out, but I am familiar with them popping up in that story. And I also found out that we will be getting a limited series called The Night Island. And it's basically centered around a luxury resort for vampires. And apparently this was featured in the Queen of the Damned novel from 1988. So yes, we are, if you'll pardon the pun, we are definitely eating when it comes to this Immortal universe, and I'm so hyped. It's so great to be excited for something, especially with the horror piece as well, because I love horror, but horror be letting me down sometimes. So having something that not only is horror centered, but is also pulling from a very popular series which is rife with possibilities and so much storytelling that can happen. I understand some folks are still upset because it's not following it word for word, but if I'm gonna be honest, I really didn't like the Interview with the Vampire novel, which is crazy because I'm a reader, and most of the time, for obvious reasons, the books are better, but I listened to / read Interview with the Vampire, and no. It was a no for me. So the fact that they made something that I feel like is just as great, if not superior, to what has been done either in the novel or in the last adaptation in the 90s, I consider that a win. Some people may not, but that's not my business. So I will definitely be tuned in. I'll be waiting with bated breath until we get the next continuation in the Immortal universe, and I can't wait. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you with the movie.